consensus now in crypto is that instead of relying on the 4-year cycle, the crypto market and its bull run is instigated by the M2 money supply. Not the M1, but the M2. This is like the total volume of cash held by the public at any particular point in time. It's like a key indicator of liquidity in the market. This includes cash, checking accounts, savings, deposits, travelers' checks, time deposits, money market funds, certificates of deposits, and other readily available funds. When this goes up, 10 weeks later, Bitcoin goes up. Bitcoin basically mirrors the M2 money supply's trajectory with a 10-week delay. M2 money supply is mainly boosted by central banks of different nations just injecting money into the economy. And as we know, the Fed and Jerome Powell have been squeezing the balls on the US economy, i.e. quantitative tightening. So where I wonder is this upward trajectory been coming from, where we notice that the M2 money supply has been going up? Who basically is responsible for this M2 money supply? Would you believe me if I said China? Well, not China, but it is China. Well, let's look at the evidence. Over the last 6 months, or so, since September, China has slowly been pushing funds into the economy, into the Chinese economy. To understand this, we have to go back to the last bull run during COVID, when China started cracking down on crypto. First of all, they banned mining. Then they went after big tech. Alibaba was about to go on the stock exchange in Hong Kong and America, I think, and that was pulled. Jack Ma disappeared for a while. The head honcho from Tencent also disappeared, and a few other big tech people were sort of slapped on the wrist and told to back down, basically to show who's the king of the jungle here. It was basically saying CEOs of big tech were getting too big for their boots. So Jack Ma disappeared for 2 years. Now, without the excuse for COVID, you can now see that manufacturing is in a big slump. We know property is in a big slump. We can no longer blame it on COVID. As seen in this clip, it says why China is going to collapse.
To date, the government's policies have had a disastrous impact on the Chinese economy. In 2020, Chinese authorities began to reform the real estate sector, causing many developers to collapse as they lost access to bank loans. The strict zero-COVID lockdown policies during the pandemic further strained local economies, while crackdowns on private enterprises stifled private investment and limited job opportunities for university graduates. Amid rising US-China tensions, President Xi Jinping's push for self-reliance in technology diverted resources away from initiatives that could have helped ease economic difficulties. So far this year, China's home sales have plummeted by 24%. The production price index has declined for 2 consecutive years due to overproduction in factories, and the consumer price index is hovering near deflation. China's economy is grappling with an array of challenges: hundreds of vacant or unfinished apartments, rising youth unemployment,
18% unemployment among young adults,
declining wages, and policies that favor high-tech industry over traditional economic pillars. This has led to a cycle where businesses are hesitant to invest.
There's a high debt level, there's growing job insecurity, plus an aging population of factory workers.
Consumers are reluctant to spend,
deteriorating consumer spending,
and local governments struggle to provide essential public services.
And back to the property thing. Property development, once seen as a trailblazer for Chinese economic growth, and this contributed about a third towards China's GDP, has burnt out. I'm looking at Evergrande, which is 300 billion in default. I'm looking at Country Garden, which is 194 billion yuan in default. Both burnt out last year. And this has created nightmare in China. Cue this woman crying and asking for her money.
In Qiang, a pregnant woman sat on her bed, sobbing in despair. Her home value plummeted from 3.6 million yuan to 1.4 million yuan, a loss of 2.2 million yuan almost overnight. According to her plan, she's facing the risk of defaulting on her mortgage due to her reduced income. It's not only the house she might lose. If it's foreclosed, she may even end up owing more. With her due date approaching, she feels utterly overwhelmed by the blow.
Houses haven't been built. Houses have not been completed. Money is not being given back. And a lot of the Chinese middle class are scared. They're scared to spend money. They're scared to travel, scared to buy houses. Growing job insecurity has led to a sharp decline in property purchase. There's also overcapacity and excess production. And there's also overinvestment in manufacturing. Add to that now Donald Trump's tariffs. So quietly, since September, China has been stimulating the economy Chinese style.
This is the clearest signal yet that the leadership has given here in China that they are ready and willing to do more to support this economy. The language that they use to describe monetary policy, saying that it would be moderately loose going into 2025, that's the first change we've had in about 14 years.
Looking at an article by Frank Chen and Ji Sig from South China's Morning Post with the heading, China fires policy bazooka to boost the Chinese economy. In this article, it says the Chinese have cut the reserve requirement rate, R&R. That's the amount of cash that commercial banks have to hold as reserves when you deposit money in their bank. This was to provide liquidity of approximately 1 trillion yuan, which is roughly $141 billion. 2, they're going to cut the mortgage rates for existing housing by 0.5 percentage point. According to Pan Gongshen, the governor of Chinese Central Bank, PBC, People's Bank of China. This is going to help at least 150 million people, according to him. Number 3, they're going to cut the repo rate from 1.7 to 1.5, effectively lowering the medium-term lending facility. I must do a video about repo, actually. Number 4, they reduced the down payment for a second home from 25% to 15%. A similar reduction was made for first-time home buyers. This is also to stimulate and revive the property market. Number 6, they're giving access of 500 billion yuan to buy shares to asset managers, insurance companies. They're saying security firms could use bonds, equity exchange traded funds, and a single stock holding of CS1 300 as collateral to swap with the central bank's treasury bonds and bills up to 300 billion yuan. They're giving them money to invest in stock. Number 7, the central bank also provided about 300 billion yuan from which public companies are now able to borrow to facilitate them buying shares buybacks. This is for like private enterprises. Number 8, we spoke earlier about the shattered consumer confidence.
September brought more grim news, with Chinese manufacturing remaining in deflation for the second consecutive year, placing significant pressure on corporate profits. Even exports, a key driver of China's economy, unexpectedly slowed that month. The Chinese government has effectively fallen into an economic trap of its own making.
So they're giving small businesses easy access to credit because apparently the small SMEs are the backbone of China's economy. As for the nosedive of the housing market and the PTSD that Chinese consumers suffering from COVID, this has made them reluctant to splurge out, and any stimulus money they get, they seem to be saving it. So rather than giving them money, the Chinese government is giving vouchers out to entice them to go out and spend. They're going to dole out about 500 million yuan, which is about $471 billion. They're called consumption vouchers, and you can go to hotels, restaurants, sports events, sports centers. Basically, rather than give them cash, because you know they're going to keep it under their mattress, they're giving them these vouchers, which means you have to use at a certain date, and you don't pay as much, but at least you're out spending and get the economy moving. Number 9, they're handing out subsidies to the needy and the disadvantaged. The only thing is, some people are saying that this is not enough. It's too little. They need to put trillions and trillions into the market for it to actually make a difference. One of the top market traders, Jerome Powell, who's been in the game for over 35 years, has a thesis that China is the key to everything. China is the key to the global liquidity. He reckons they'll have to stimulate with QE very soon. The problem right now is the dollar is strong against the yuan. The yen is strong against the yuan. But yet, 50% of China's debt is US debt. There's a debt deflation going on in China. And as Jerome Powell says, their bond market is in free fall. At some point, they're going to accept the tariffs. They're going to do everything they can to look strong in public, all optics. And they'll probably go for a kind of Mar-a-Lago Accord type deal.
China's balance sheet lags China bond yields. So if you remember, the US said, well, we won't ever get to QE until our bond yields get close to zero. Well, that's happening in China right now. They're in a full debt deflation. And China's going to be very important to this story. And it's the most important headline that is going to come is what the agreement is with China. The agreement with China will be, you will agree to tariff terms, we will battle it out in public and make us look like we're all strongmen because you have a dollar debt problem. The Chinese have a dollar debt problem and they need to service those debts. The problem is the RMB is too weak and the dollar is too strong. They don't have the cash flows in a slow economic environment to pay for it. They know, the US knows, they need a weaker dollar. Now, the mechanism by which China gets access to those dollars is usually via the euro-dollar market, and it's Japan that is the big driver of the euro-dollar market. So when we look at the weakening of the dollar, I like to focus on dollar-yen to think of how this plays out. The yen is one of the world's big exporting economies, and it has a very weak currency. The yen needs to strengthen. It needs to rebalance lower. And this head and shoulders top and this head and shoulders top tell us the US, Scott Bessent, is going to get what he wants, which is a weaker dollar. A weaker dollar will stimulate global demand. It stimulates and allows for the rolling of global US dollar debts. It allows for exports and imports to free up. It allows for the movement of trade, even with tariffs. And if China can have a weakening yuan against the yen, what it allows them to do is to compete. And that rebalances global trade and gets the global growth cycle going. So China headline risk to the positive side is the big one. Everything else is kind of noise.
That clip there showing Jerome Powell. Follow him on Real Vision. Qiang of UOBK, the chief officer for this wealth management company, said this stimulus is too small compared to 2008 stimulus. They're going to need about 4 to 5 trillion to save China. But with the advent of Donald Trump's tariffs, they can't be seen to be in fear of what the USA is doing.
First of all, China's rise is inevitable. No one can stop it. The United States cannot stop it. That's the mega trend. Secondly, this trade war launched by President Trump and his government against the whole world, including China, is the wrong war. It damages the free trade. Now, if things are not handled well, this means complete stop of China-US trade, both ways. No goods exported from the United States to China, and complete stop of everything made in China to the United States. If the United States wants to really welcome this, China will reciprocate, and causing the breakup of China-US relations. Whether this will evolve from peace to war, well, let's all be prepared. In essence, what China now declares is that it is prepared to fight to the end. Trade war, tariff war, technology war, or real war. So the ball is in Trump's court. You decide, and I will reciprocate. I will never succumb to the US pressure.
So I believe this tariff is going to push Xi Jinping to go full throttle on quantitative easing, the Chinese way, of course. The other thing is China has actually reduced its vulnerability to American chokeholds and sanctions and all that export control. And they've been spreading their wings and making deals with other nations so that they don't have to depend on America. They've been doing this for a while, long before Donald Trump came in. That's why they're a bit cocky, that they can get away with it. Qiang, President Xi's deputy, gave a speech at Hangzhou, China's capital of innovation, saying they will not give in to any of America's demands. The only problem is, with the stimulus could come a liquidity trap. Liquidity trap basically means the citizens could decide to hoard the cash and refuse to spend due to fear.
The average Chinese citizen saves more than 40% of their income, where in the US, it's less than 10%, because the only real choice in China has been to save. There are huge gaps in Chinese healthcare and social security, and the one-child policy that China held on to for so long left generations dependent on just one child to help support them in old age. So just 38% of Chinese GDP comes from its citizens buying stuff, where in the US, it's 70%. That is a problem for China because it makes the country overly reliant on selling stuff to other countries or on the construction of apartment buildings, roads, and bridges, because there comes a point where you've built too much or countries say, we want less of your stuff, which is exactly what is happening today.
I.e. that QE could fall on deaf ears. And if that happens, they'll have to go ham. Otherwise, America wins. And for what I've been seeing lately, I don't think they're going to let America win. So until next time, this is Alexander F.O. Nileri from Caliban Crypto, moving away from talking about the USA, trying to see it from the perspective of China.